Good, we're here. So, all right, so I've been thinking a lot about, I've been just like, I mean, obviously I'm a reporter, I read the newspaper every day anyway, a bunch of them actually, but, and obviously we've always talked about media coverage of the opiate crisis with a critical eye, but more than usual even since we're doing this project, I've really been, set my Google alerts, etc., for any coverage. And I just want to spend a couple minutes talking about what you see, because I have my ear to the street, but you've actually been there. The whole point of this project is that you're working with people who, like in your family, for example, as close to your family, who are still going through this. So the whole point here is what the hell is not being covered. We're already talking to Tommy about cocktail, people nodding off and why that is. Your average person looks at somebody nodding off on the corner of Mass Ave and says, look, that's somebody on heroin. That's not the case. So we're really delineating stuff. We're getting, closer to the ground. So I'll throw one observation out there, and then I just want to hear about what you see when you see, a story about opiates on the news, for example. So for me, the first big observation is
horror, dude, is when I see it.
Well, that's what you see in real life, but are you seeing the horror? For me, one thing I see is not the horror. I see the horse race. So we see these headlines day after one every day at least. It's always like it's one of two things. It's statistics. So like, opiate deaths have gone down over the past 4 years on the South Shore. And it's like, what am I supposed to get, a fucking party hat?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then the other one is the opposite. It'll be like, 30 kids died of, from fentanyl this weekend. But we don't know anything else. So my point is it's unbelievably superficial. They're not even trying to talk to people.
Do they say how, the amount of prescription opiates from I'd say early 90s, like 92 or whatever on there, to the recent years has increased by almost 300%?
I mean,
sometimes
they
public
do.
takes.
Sometimes they do, but what's behind that? That's the stuff we want to get to. I think that at this point, when we started talking about this, literally 10 years, more than 10 years ago now, the storyline, which is, very much what Oxymorons is rooted in, and just the story that we were some of the first to write about because of you, was, it's simple. Simple as pain meds, maybe, an athlete with a broken leg, leads to heroin, dope is cheaper, and now everybody knows that, but we're past that. That narrative is fucking old,
now
right?
Everybody's on fentanyl.
That's
a whole new version of all this.
But that story's only getting, that original story, which we've been reporting for years when it was the case, that's what the mainstream media reports now. So what are the stories? As we do this over the next, 2018, if that's the year of F.I.G.H.T, who the hell knows what's going to come up? But what are some of the stories, kind of like the one we're working on?
One of the biggest stories that I want to, that we're not there with yet, and it might take us a long time to get there with, is the problem. Why is there such an open eye from, the day I made my movie, and all the news coverage and media coverage and documentaries that have been done about how this stuff is killing Americans by the millions, right? Mm-hmm. Why is it not getting better? Is it getting worse? What is the machine, the ultimate machine? What truly is the ultimate machine poisoning, society here with a drug that just wipes people out like a virus?
The pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, the pharmaceutical industry. But I think it goes even deeper than that. Obviously, why can't they be stopped? Why can't our government say, all right, in the 90s we didn't have this problem early on because there was only this much opiates going out. And now we're at 270 something times more. This is legit, you know what I mean, than what we were there, and there's a crisis, What
are some of the nuances? So we find, we have big 60 Minutes revelations in the past week about, what the DEA knew, what they could have stopped, about how people from the DEA are literally lobbying on the other side for the pharmaceutical. But that's the stuff that, what kind of stuff are the reporters that we're working with who are on the ground, the hand-to-hand exchanges, when you hear about the actual doctor's offices or the actual what's really going on in the street,
they're keeping everybody in a revolving door. And one of the things that is bothering me that I'm seeing out there a lot with family members of mine and friends of mine actually, people who are currently on this medication and people that I've talked to get off of it and why, and it's not easy at all, but it's the Suboxone. Suboxone is good in what it was originally made for, which was a short-term detox, meaning you're coming off of heroin, instead of doing methadone, which is just gross, right? They put you on Suboxone. It's, it tricks your brain into thinking you're high, and basically they're supposed to wean you off, like, 2 to 1 to half to a quarter to nothing. You know what I mean? And when they first said that, it was supposed to be like anywhere from like 3 weeks to 3 months was like, 6 months was like a super, long time to be on it. But it's supposed to be short term because this stuff is addictive and it messes with you, and they don't even know what the long term side effects are because it's a fairly new drug. In 2002, it was it was when people started taking it really, and what they're doing is for the money. You know what I mean? They don't want to cut the people off of it and have them detox off of it because they're making now all the heroin addicts are now becoming Suboxone addicts, and it makes people on I see these people, I know them. It's like me knowing you, and then you're doing Suboxone, and all of a sudden you're just wacky. And when you're running out, you're wacky, and you know what I mean? And your whole life revolves around taking that Suboxone pill every morning, and whenever you take it, and then your doctor's appointment is like, it's like caught in your head, like you can't miss it, It's insane what it's doing to people, and they're not weaning people off, and it's keeping a revolving door in the opiate world going because people are getting the Suboxones to trade them to Suboxone heads to get money to buy dope. So it's all one big circle, dude, chasing its own tail.
That's really, it's funny because it is complicated, but it's not, and it's something that the mainstream media, and I hate to just use that generic term, but what else am I going to do? We see, some of the most irresponsible reporting I ever see, and everybody who we work with in this program, I'll say the same thing to them. I'll say, how many times have you seen something on the media? You've heard me say this. Mm-hmm. How many times have you read something in a paper, seen something on the nightly news, etc., that did not reflect that situation, the situation as you know it on the ground at all? And every time everybody says, yeah, of course, especially when it comes to these, to certain drug busts, to, these, there's always a reaction when the police love flashing when they get a bunch of drugs and a couple of guns, what I mean, and the money, they take those shots. And it's laughable because everybody knows there's another bundle of dope around the corner.
Right.
But at this point that the war on drugs is a proven fraud, even though the Trump administration is trying to get back into that business. But what, as for listen, this is a New England program. I wish we could talk about drugs around the country, but it's enough of a program.
And the war on drugs, if they want to apply the war on drugs to specifically opiates, go ahead. Because you say this all the time. It's apples and oranges, You cannot lump in drugs combined. Cocaine, methamphetamines, cat tranquilizer, cannabis, if you want to still call that a drug because you're living in the Stone Age, you know what I mean? If alcohol even, if you lump all those things together, they're still not doing what opiates are doing. So if you do the war on drugs, that's the war on the pharmaceutical companies and saying, you guys can't make this much no more. You're making way too much money, whether we're getting a cut, you know what I mean? Like, we have to stop this now, or it's crowd control. And they just continue this vicious circle of wiping people out, and everyone's like, oh, I don't know what to do. And then people get stuck and say they have a disease, and then they're just medicated for the rest of their lives, and they're numb, and they're not doing nothing, and they're just, it's crowd control, bro. I might sound like a conspiracy theory, but that's my opinion, dude.
So speaking of that, let's talk about one of the first stories that you're working on for the series. It's about a family member. Now, my question is, we all politics really actually.
It's two family members, really.
It seems like politicians are finally saying the right things. Like we got to treat the problem instead of just locking people up. Obviously, it's 2017. You have been watching this firsthand, and it just doesn't seem to be the case. There are a lot more trapdoors than there are treatment options and help and. Any kind of people getting out of prison.
And nobody's focusing on the stories of inspiration of people who are not opiate addicts no more, not involved in this stuff no more, for whatever reason, whatever worked for them. Whether if NA works for people, great. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean it's going to work for this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. But if it works for one person out of 100, good for that person. You know what I mean? And the stories of how anybody else, like our friend, Stiz Grimy, who. Speaks out publicly. He was a heroin addict from Chelsea, just on the other side of the bridge from me, and then went on to communications and Connecticut School Broadcast wherever he went. Now he's a producer in an AF show. That's the story of inspiration. He does it. we don't put enough of that out in the public eye. It's always about how horrible everything is, and it's horrible.
Well,
But
one thing about this is, and this is why this is a tough program, and it's going to take years to really, develop, and we're happy to help you start. And one of the big things I think is going to be that if eventually it could get to a point where you can actually give people real jobs, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because the media is something where there's not a lot of like official it's it's freelance work and stuff
it's
like
a great
that.
way to get someone that's really passionate about something, really wants to speak on something that may be very personal to them. It they may be so so behind what they're writing and saying because they lost someone, and those are the people you want writing about it. People that actually know it and care about it. You know what I mean? Not people that are just like, oh, this is going to make me look good on this side. This is going to make me look good with the police. Oh, this is going to make me look good with the street guys. Like, whatever that you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's no in between on that.
And you got me thinking of something interesting the other day. We were talking. You called me and you said that you're trying to film in a courtroom, and you were asking me what's the protocol, and I told you it's different in every court. It's one of the biggest nightmares as a reporter, a journalist, a filmmaker, whatever you're doing, and I think that's
Unless you're making a movie, of course.
it's also that's different because then things not in session.
No.
Yeah, but but the metaphor
To go in as the media.
Well, think of what the greater meaning of that, right? It's like I'm sitting here complaining, why the fuck doesn't the mainstream cover any of the stuff that we're talking about? And they are to blame. There's also no access. It's not like the fucking you know what it takes as a journalist to get into a prison? Forget about it. It takes
between mine and your credentials
it takes
combined,
forever. It's
me
still-
saying
it's
I want to get
still-
into a district court in the state of Massachusetts shouldn't have not been an issue.
It's an issue.
But it is.
So my point is we're going to try our best to get in there, put the microphones. If not, microphones if we can't get video cameras. If legal.
Whatever we're gonna
Well,
do.
no, because frankly, yeah, exactly. So
You know?
maybe we'll have to get people coming
bring
out
a
of the
sketch
courtroom.
artist with us.
Yeah, whatever it takes. But that's we're going to try to get as close to the problem, as close to the shit that's actually going on. And it's listen, there's editing and there's a lot of expertise that's involved, but really it's also, frankly, it's quite simple.
Yeah.
That we're really going to get as close to the source of the problem as possible.